Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. We have another fantastic episode and a brand new guest here on the podcast, Dr. Jaffe. And I'm super excited to have on. We connected. We had a lot of shared connections on LinkedIn, and we were just talking and sharing our shared passion for transformation and helping individuals grow. And I, Dr. Jaffe, Adi, having you here is so exciting for me because of the important work you're doing at Ignited. And we're going to get into today the idea of people struggling with work burnout, I should say,
Yep.
and dealing with, dealing with in unhealthy ways. And we want to learn from you in how do we, number one, address it, just
Mhm.
identify it and get healthier. So I just want to say thank you for being on the podcast. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I love this topic of burnout. I think a lot of people have it wrong. I think a lot of people think that you burn out when you work hard,
Hmm.
and I think there's a lot more to it. I actually love the Freudian slip on workout
Yeah.
because I think there are a lot of physical manifestations or a lot of physical lessons we can take from athletes, from
Hmm.
sports, from working out, physical
Yep.
labor that really parlay well to the business and self-improvement side of things.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, this what your mission is of as I've been learning, and I'm excited to unpack this some more about how do we create transformational leadership, help create solutions that challenge the status quo, or like, oh, it's always this
Mm,
way, or there's better ways to do things. And that's why I'm super excited to have you here, of what you've been learning, what you've been sharing, what you've been studying, to help our listeners understand. Because on the Business Roundtable podcast, we have lots of different guests come on, but we haven't talked about this specifically. And I feel like there's a lot of folks that just feel like if I just do more,
mm,
I'll figure out how to do this. I was just talking to a colleague actually, Adi, about how she was making more money, and then she was buying more things, and it's just a bad cycle of
yeah.
unhealthy living, and then it can get worse. So I want to get your feedback and just how do we even identify, are we in burnout? Are we starting to go into chronic
Mm.
stress, addiction? In are we even, because sometimes people are in denial. They don't really even realize that. So how would you even help people identify, hey, are you really in burnout? Are you really in starting to be in workplace like addiction?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
would you say to that?
I love that. So I'm actually going to
Mhm.
pull up on the side over here as we talk this
Mhm.
a burnout talk that I give oftentimes to associations or corporations and pull some information from us as we want it. But first of
Yes.
all, it's important to recognize that many, many employees in America and the US are closer to burnout than they think oftentimes. And
Mm.
that's I'm saying that more because I want to just set the standard that if we think of these happen to other people out there, we oftentimes don't pay enough attention to our own struggles, our own needs. And then what we we let go of the controls, we let go of the processes, the habits that we need to put in place to protect ourselves. And so I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. Um,
Mhm.
I'm gonna pull up the number for us here in a second as I
Yeah,
actually
absolutely.
see it. So I hate misquoting things of being a researcher. I always want to make sure I get the right number.
I
Um,
get that.
but uh, yeah, but burnout is a real issue. And you identify it not just by people being stressed out. So stress is obviously a big piece of it, but there are other aspects to what burnout means to an individual work in a work environment that I think are really important. And a lot of them have to do with isolation, with
Mm.
becoming less involved in your work and your personal relationships, feeling like what you do doesn't matter, right? Like those are some of the big pieces that are part of burnout. Um, and depending on the kind of work that you do, if you don't identify it early enough, you can get caught in this cycle. And
Mm.
a lot of us have really stressful jobs, and so I think I already said this, but I just want to really, really, really stress this. You can be in a very, very stressful job. Think firefighting, think, ER physician, think,
Mhm.
pilots, like really high stress jobs,
Yep.
and put the the habits in place so that you don't experience burnout. I'll say definitely not regularly, right? So burnout will come from chronic stress over time when you feel like you're inefficient, like you're ineffective. You feel like there's no way out. You're disconnected from the purpose and the reason why you do that work.
Mm.
All these
Mhm.
things together combine to creating a sense of failure at at your life, your professional life, which then can lead to burnout. And so we have to pay attention to all of those factors. You mentioned, how does somebody know? Oftentimes, you won't necessarily know
Mm.
yourself unless you do
Yep.
assessments on it. And so
Yep.
I'm always a really big believer in getting information from other people around you, talking to others, sharing. Um,
Mhm.
One other big thing for us in the US in particular, we don't like showing vulnerability.
Yep.
I mean, that's why Brene Brown's work has landed
Oh,
for
yeah.
so many people, right? For many years, we've been told, to stiff upper lip, keep your chin up,
Mhm.
everything is fine. And so burnout is about identifying things long before they get to the place where you're thinking of quitting, thinking of harming yourself, you're in depression. It's about identifying when you're in the process before it gets too bad, so you can actually put the boundaries, put the roadblocks in place to make sure you never get there.
Yeah. Man, you hit a lot of good points there, and I feel like the vulnerability, like you said, guilt and shame. I have been reading Bernie Brown's Atlas of the Heart, understanding all these emotions and being able to, access them and without guilt or shame, like you said, that stiff upper lip. I feel like that's where a lot of standard, like I don't know, corporate wellness programs, well intentioned, don't
Mm.
actually get to the root cause of what you're talking about. It's like, okay, let's put a Band-Aid on it or something. It doesn't really get to the real issue, right?
Yeah, and look, it's so job specific. It's right. There are themes for burnout, but I believe in mental health in general.
Mhm.
Too often we try to have a unifying theory that will apply to everybody all the time.
Mhm.
And that can work in the abstract,
Yep.
but it'll probably be really big and general, hyper general even, right? Because
Mhm.
you're trying to include everybody. And then when
Mhm.
you talk to a specific person, you go talk to a specific entrepreneur or founder, right? I've worked with musicians and athletes. Um, I can't tell a musician. I mean, look, one of the biggest musicians I ever worked with, I asked him on day one when we met, I said, "When are you gonna stop touring?" Because it was killing him, right?
Mm.
And then he said, "I
Mhm.
can't." I mean, I can't. I mean, not only
Mhm.
does his life depend on it, and also he loves doing his art, but also, 15 of his friends, his whole family, like everybody depended on him touring. So
Yep.
there are limitations. He did end up 5, 6, 7 years later quitting, touring,
Mm.
but, that took a long time, and he had to
Yep.
do a lot on the way. And so, the question is, within the confines of what is available to this person, what can they do? Right?
Mhm.
So with an athlete, it's like, I mean, they gotta do the workouts, they gotta do the studying, they gotta do the
Yep.
self-care, the massages, and all that other stuff because they have to take care, the nutrition because they gotta take care of their body long term in order to have longevity. So where do you put the self-care in? Because self-care is non-negotiable. So
Mhm.
when do you fit it in? Is it, now you see athletes like NBA players sometimes with headphones on the bench, like meditating or listening to music
Mm.
while they're shooting. Why are they doing that? Because they need to eke out, even if it's 5% of their time for self-care. I've got a
Yep.
client I've got a client in finance, like, when they're talking to big investors, does it matter how I feel about what they need to do about their self-care? Not so much, right? If they gotta prepare
Mm.
for a big meeting where there's hundreds of millions or 1,000,000,000 or 2 or $3,000,000,000 at stake, would you stay up all night? Like, would you work your butt off for 5 days straight and not work out if there's $1,000,000,000 on at stake?
Mhm.
I think a lot of people would say I'd at least try it, right? So it's like you have to fit the burnout prevention
Mm.
to the environment and the requirements of the individual, and each one of us has to make those decisions for ourselves.
Yeah, man, that there's a lot in there. I'm excited to unpack this because the like you said, the reality is dealing with this. I work with a lot of companies and we're always about trying to get the obviously the most out of our employees, but I think that if we don't address this burnout and this chronic stress or addictive behavior, our performance goes down. We're not able to actually achieve as much as we can. So it's like counterintuitive. Like I just got to do more. I got to be like if you're this gentleman. Like I got to tour more. I just got to tour more. It's like it's it's counterproductive. I mean, counterintuitive. I guess is what I'm saying. Is like what I hear you saying is like, look, you actually do need to just be self care. Maybe not completely don't tour at all, but certainly tour less or adjust it, or like you said, that if that athlete putting on the meditating, figuring out like how to do this. And everybody's different, like you said, the position, the role that you're doing. So you can't do a one size fits all solution because everybody's different. And everybody also has different backgrounds and history of, you know, maybe I don't struggle with drug abuse or gambling, but maybe it's I want to go buy a bunch of stuff or whatever it's whatever that is for you, right? Whatever that
Yeah.
comes up.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I'll just give one I'm
Mhm.
in the mental health field. So in the mental health field, you can get, I'm looking at the statistic fine, like 70 to
Yeah.
80% turnover rates when things are bad in terms of burnout. Think like,
Mm.
residential psychiatric nursing, like high intensity mental health
Mhm.
jobs will sometimes have 70% turnover rate. Just think about that for a second. That means 70% of your staff will not make it to next year. So an organization, that is terrible,
That's
right?
terrible.
Think about having to replace 50, 60, 70% of your workforce every year, and that's your frontline staff. So
Mhm.
what does that do to your business? You're constantly putting out fires. So
Mhm.
why do we wanna put this a lot of people think, "Well, yeah, but there's all this work we have to do, so we've gotta push everybody hard." Okay, that's great, but now you're setting up more work for yourself long term. You give
Yes.
everybody 10% less work, or you give them a little bit more control over the schedule. You allow them to have more self-care built into those days, and you go from 70% turnover to 50 or 40. How much time did you save yourself by 30% of your staff staying longer? So
Mhm.
that same thing applies organizationally, it applies on the individual level, and, we're talking about the workplace. All this stuff, it impacts families, it impacts
Mhm.
communities. The impact is felt far beyond the business itself. And so I think we have to be proactive about this. And again, I'll go back to the exercise example that we started out with in a way through that slip. Like
Mhm.
everybody wants to lose weight, everybody wants to be more fit, everybody wants to, look better, right?
Yep.
And be stronger. So let's say, like, those are things that everybody has, to different extent, like, some people care more about the look and other people care more about the strength, it doesn't matter, but, like, there's some balance of that.
Yep.
We all know how to do it. We all know how to do it, right? It's like
Yep.
pick some exercise regimens. If you're trying to lose more weight, then yeah, build some muscle, but exercise, do cardiovascular work and burn a big amount of calories, but then reduce your eating.
Mhm.
Switch up high fat, high calorie foods for low fat, lower calorie foods. Like it's you don't have to be a genius to figure this
Mhm.
out, right? And are there people with medical conditions? 100%. But the vast majority of people, what I just described, would work for it. By vast majority, I mean like up more than 90%.
Mhm.
But this actually happened to me during COVID. It's hard work, man. It's hard
Mhm.
work. You gotta show up to the gym or
Yep.
put your running shoes on almost every day,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Put 1 or 2 days of rest in there, but 5, 6 days a week, you gotta show up, and even on the rest days, it's active days, so you're walking, etcetera. You gotta not eat fast food burgers every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're on the way to work, and they're
Yep.
3.50 a piece, and they keep you full, but they also hurt your body, so you gotta cut
Mhm.
back on that. You gotta make lunch at home and eat cleaner foods. Everything I just described takes work.
You're
And
right.
so what do people do? They just don't do the work. They
Yes.
want the outcome. They can't commit to doing the work. It's the
Mm.
same with burnout, right? You have to eke out time. Actually, literally, like after this, I would have done it for this
Mm.
one, but I thought it was going to be disruptive to our conversation. I bought a walking treadmill for my desk.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm really big on working out. So what I was gonna say is, in the middle of COVID, when everybody was sitting at home drinking all day, don't get me wrong, I also probably indulged more than I normally do since it was literally I'm in LA, like, you couldn't
Yep.
leave your house for days sometimes.
Crazy.
So, watch a lot of TV, and drink a lot is what a lot of people did. Well,
Mhm.
I I came out to LA for music, so I built a little music studio downstairs, like, just order equipment and made music, and then I moved all like, I bought gym equipment and moved it into my garage because I said, "I can't all the gyms are closed, I can't not work
Yep.
out." Weirdly, I ended up working out twice as much as I used to because now it was downstairs, so I could just do a 20-minute workout down in my gym. I've
Mhm.
continued that, I actually just shared this on social media. It's now 5 years later, and I still work out if I'm home because I travel a lot for work, 4 or
Mhm.
5 days in my garage because it's convenient and easy. I've kept it up, and because
Yes.
I've kept it up, my body has changed, my health has changed, my
Mhm.
cardiovascular, my blood pressure's gone down, like, all this stuff, it wasn't a problem back then, but it wasn't great. It's now
Yeah.
vastly improved, but it took years, David. It took, like,
Mm.
I would say 2 years of committed work. What
Mhm.
is everybody most excited about in America right now? Ozempic and GLP-1 antagonists. It's like everybody is always looking for the quick fix.
The right. Right?
And it's the same, we used to be depressed, then we invented Prozac. Great, but now relationships break up because people don't wanna have sex with each other anymore. Um, we're still not dealing with the underlying reasons why people were depressed or stressed out. Yeah, we like put a nice Band-Aid on it, and it kinda
Mhm.
looked okay for a while, and more we're realizing it's actually not helping at the deeper level. For
Man.
anybody listening right now, if you wanna prevent burnout, you wanna feel better in your life on a daily basis, it's gonna require work. But,
Mm.
and I think I'm borrowing from Ed Mylett on this, living a shitty life where you're unhappy and you wake up every day upset and distraught is hard.
Mm.
Waking up
Yeah.
every day and doing your gratitude list and meditating and going for a walk and organizing your day and committing to finishing the 1 or 2 things you have to do that day, even if you have to work till 9 PM, is also hard. But then you get a life you like. So, choose your heart, which one do you
Yes.
want?
Yeah, choose your heart, absolutely. I mean, y this goes into kinda my next kinda area I wanna get into. We've kinda set the stage. We recognize there's this burnout. We recognize this epidemic that's going on. This isn't new. We're just but what how do we develop kind of this leadership driven approach, this, like you just kind of talked about it, like how do we take responsibility and foster that no, in ourselves, in that
Mm.
culture? You kind of, you're leading by example, but like we don't take responsibility, we're a victim. And now we're in my experience, um Adi, we are, stuck. If we're a victim, we're just stuck with, this is just
Oh,
happening to me,
yeah.
this is just happening to me, and I'm just, no, I
No.
can't, right?
Yeah, yeah. So there are a couple of things. So in my book Unhooked, one of the things that I
Mm,
talk about is something I call the sphere of influence.
mhm,
Um, some of that exists in I think and Grow Rich too, and like
mhm,
some other books. But my version of it is I can split up all my opportunities and all the possibilities where I can put my energy in the world into three buckets: things I fully control, things
mhm.
I influence, and things that are fully out of my control.
Yep.
I think a lot of us spend a lot of our time, the majority of our time every day, looking at the last bucket, the things we don't control.
Mm,
What does that
mhm.
look like for you? You may be watching the news all day about what Trump is saying, or what
Yep.
Kamala Harris is saying, or what Putin did, or what the fucking weather is in Florida, or like, oh my God, like it's the worst global warming on the face of the planet. And you're like looking at the news and you're stressed out and you're posting on social media about it and you're really angry all day. Well, guess what?
Mhm,
You can't do anything about any of those things. Here's what you can influence. You can influence elections to some extent. You can put votes in. You can rally. You can do that. You want to do that? Go do it. But sitting around your house and bemoaning reality does nothing. It just wastes your time and wastes all your energy. And what it
mhm,
does is it doesn't leave enough energy for the things you fully control, where I think you need to put most of your attention in the things you influence. The thing
mhm.
is, the things we fully control is a very small number of things. I
Yes.
control the actions I take, the words I speak, to some extent the thoughts I have, although I would argue you more influence those and you can get into behaviors and habits in order to change those over time. And then I
Mhm,
influence the people around me, but to an extent, right? My wife is a very strong person. I influence her behavior and actions and
mhm.
beliefs. I don't control them. Man, I
Yep.
got a 14, a 12, and a 6-year-old. I don't even control them. I don't control my 6-year-old, but I
Yeah.
influence them. So what
Yes.
I say in the book is I want you spending 40, 50, 60% of your time every day focusing on what you can do.
Mhm,
Then spend the next 20, 30, 40%, depending on how much you put in that first bucket, on things you influence. Save 10% if you really want for watching shit you literally can't do anything about, but it's not going to move the needle on your life. So when you wake up in the morning, it's a brand new day. And
mhm,
you get to decide, what do I wanna put my energy on? And if you wanna waste it, that's fine, but then don't complain that your life didn't go anywhere because you're literally putting your energy on things that will not move the needle for you. Move it all the
mm,
way to the other side. And what I learned in my own life, is some of it is about the behaviors out in the world. But part of what you control, and it takes time, is your perspective, the way you look at things.
Mhm.
You can have 2 people go through the same exact experience and have a completely different impression, and what that leaves is it leaves them feeling differently, and it leaves them
Mhm.
acting differently, right?
Yeah.
Um, I really love, Jocko Willmick's, Extreme Ownership book. I don't
Awesome.
know if
Yeah.
you read
Uh-huh.
that book,
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Familiar with that. Yep.
and so I was already deeply into personal accountability, but just imagine to yourself that tomorrow everything falls apart for you. You lose your job, your marriage falls apart, like everything just falls apart tomorrow. Is that gonna be painful and is it gonna be terrible and is it gonna suck? 100%. But you have to make a choice. Are you gonna show up and make the best of it and move forward in the best way
Mhm.
possible? Or are you just gonna be reactive and
Mhm.
allow that what is now the past and has happened
Yeah.
to control the way you show up? I think that's a choice we have to make every day, sometimes every minute,
Mhm.
but it completely alters the way we show up in the world.
Yeah, 100%. I think I really like your idea of this influence, and one of the things we were talking about earlier on, it I think even we were started recording was like, how do we live, transparently, authentically? Because, I get encouraged candidly, and I know your story, one of the reasons I reached out to you is because of your background, your history, and why you wrote this book,
Yeah.
why you have Ignited, and I think, getting free of guilt and shame, like you said,
Mm,
if I lost my marriage, if I lost my house, that's facts of your life, that doesn't define you, and I just if you wouldn't mind, just sharing a little
sure.
bit of, like, how you've influenced people by live the life that you've been living, like, the choices that you've been
Sure.
making, you know?
Yeah, and I'll go into that shame and piece a little bit too, because in my TEDx talk, I talk about it a lot, and it's
Mhm,
funny, now it's so far behind me, I
mhm.
forget about it sometimes,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
took years to get to that place.
Mhm,
I'll tell the short version.
mhm,
I got badly addicted to meth, badly. Like, I'm 165 pounds sitting here in front of you. I was 124 pounds at my
mm,
lowest. 40 pounds less. I was like skin and bones.
yep,
Um, and I ended up serving time in jail for it. I served a year, but I had essentially an 8-year sentence that was split up into 1 year that I did and 7 that were waiting for me if I screwed up later. Um,
mm,
and so a year in jail sucked. But I spent a year in rehab before, otherwise I would have spent a decade in prison because
mm,
the judge needed to see me not at 124 pounds. I needed to clean my act up before I went for sentencing. So I
mhm,
fought the case for a year in while I was in rehab, and then I spent a year in jail. My dad's a physician. My mom was a human resource manager at a bank. I was upper middle class all the way. Spending a year in LA County jail was not part of the plan, David. It was not
mhm,
on the program. If there was an outline of what my life was supposed to look like, it was nowhere in the outline initially.
yep,
But that's where I took myself. And the
mhm,
moment that changed, the moment that I realized that I had taken myself there, and it didn't matter that my dad left us and was an a-hole when I grew up, and it didn't matter
mhm,
like it didn't matter that I was 14 when we moved and I became the weird, awkward kid in high school, like, all that stuff was behind me, and yes, it impacted me, but it was
mhm,
now outside of my control, and how I showed up tomorrow was the only thing that I could control, and
mhm,
so, when that accountability started happening, it was the first time I realized and started to take an ownership of what that needed to be, and
mhm,
still, think about it, right? A year in rehab, I'm now clean of drugs. I was completely sober when I had to go to court and turn myself in to go serve a year.
mm,
So it wasn't like I got arrested for all my drugs and then served a year. I got arrested
right,
for all my drugs, cleaned up my act, and then I had to go serve a year.
wow,
My family and I liked each other now, like, we were good friends. I had people outside, like, I was ready to go to life, but then I had to go serve time.
mm,
And I'm in jail just waiting, right? Like, trying to make every day pass, and 364 days later, I was finally out, able to start my life.
mm,
That lesson taught me a lot. Number 1, just because you just because you acted well, just because you're doing well, doesn't mean that life is gonna just open up the gates for you and make everything
mhm,
easy, right?
mhm,
Was I hoping that I wouldn't have to serve time? 100%. Was I lucky to get a year? Also 100%, right? It's like,
mm,
considering what I got caught with, I a year in jail was not bad. And so
Mhm,
it was fair. I was happy that that's what I got, and now what it was up to my control was just making it through, but jail sucked. It was
mhm.
all the things you see about, right? Bend over, spread
Yes.
them, naked showers with, like, 70 other men in the room, like, you know, murderers and rapists right next to you and screaming at other people about who they're gonna kill when they come out. A year of that. A year of that, right? Showers twice a week when they open up the gate, and you better make it out with your towel before, or
Mm,
you never get back in. They move you around constantly.
mhm.
Riots, lockdowns. Like, we only went outside. I was there for a year. We went outside 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
3 times that I got outside to see sky. You have to figure out how to make it, man. You can't break down.
Mhm,
So,
mhm, mhm,
like, you can't show weakness, you can't, like, lose your shit in there because then they'll
mhm,
prey on you. So,
mhm,
when you make it out of that for a year,
mhm.
the rest of life, it's like, bring it on, right? Like, I know I'm not going back to that, so
Yes.
let's figure out how I
Amen.
don't do that again, but
Right?
the rest of it, bring on. So, I now get to look at my life in terms of if I could be resilient enough to make it through a challenge like that, and I have to remind myself all the time, and I can talk about how I do some of that, then what is
Mhm.
the next challenge? And just to be
Yes.
clear, jail was not the last time I had my back against the wall. I've probably
Mm.
had that happen 2 or 3 other times in life. What
Mhm.
I've learned now is that's how I grow.
Yes.
The times that I become the best version of myself, my next best version,
Yep.
is when there's a huge challenge in front of me. So what I've learned to do now, and this is a challenge to everybody
Mhm.
who's listening to this, stop running away from discomfort. If
Mhm.
discomfort is chasing you, and I'll give examples here in a second, but if discomfort is
Yeah.
chasing you, it's gonna catch up. But if you don't turn around and look at the monster in its face, it's just gonna grow. I'll
Yes.
give examples. If you're in a job you hate and you wake up every day wanting to cry or scream or punch the wall because you have to go there, that's not gonna end. You
Mm.
have to do something about it. What does that mean? You may have to quit and go look for another job, or you may have to start a side hustle and fund yourself. You may have to look for a job while you're working at this job. You may have to go talk to your boss. You may have to do something really uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but it's not gonna stop. If you're in a marriage that is problematic or in a relationship that makes you unhappy, it's not gonna stop. You
Right.
have to go do something about it. Talk
Mhm.
to your partner, go to counseling, read 50 books, leave. Right? Some of my
Mhm.
clients have to get divorced or leave. It doesn't
Mhm.
work.
Right.
That's okay if a better life is on the other side for you and your partner.
Mhm.
But these things, they do not resolve themselves, right? A GLP-1, an Ozempic injection,
Yeah.
or a medication is not going to fix your relationship. It
Yep.
may make you less upset about your relationship,
Yep.
but if you and your partner don't like each other and don't talk to each other, you haven't had sex in 7 months, and,
Mhm.
you sleep in separate rooms, not because one of you snores, but because, you just don't wanna be in the same room together at
Mhm.
night, that's a problem, and you have to deal with it. So,
Absolutely.
let's just own this shit, wake up in the morning, pound your chest a little bit, say to yourself, "I'm gonna do the hard things."
Mhm.
That to me is where workouts come in for me.
Yep.
Like, I have standards for myself, and I try to meet them. I don't meet them 100% of the time, just to be
Sure.
really clear. I meet them, like, 80 to 89% of the time, right? Like,
Mhm.
most days, I will meet my criteria of what a successful day is like, and that has taken years to train myself to do,
Mhm.
but it gives me confidence that when the next goal, the next thing in my life is set in front of me, I will do the work that's required to get there.
Right. So important, because here, I know you work with, like you said, musicians and, CEOs, executives, and I think getting healthy and the work that you're doing is so important because what I do with Steward Your Business is really the teams, but I realize, uh, Adi, if if the leader is not healthy and they're not living in a good life, it's really hard to then have your team like they're looking to you, right, as like kind of the standard, like how should I be living? And if they're not if whether they know directly, maybe they don't know all the addictions or the challenges because you can put honestly, some people are pretty good at putting on masks and kind of trying to present something. In reality, it's not. It's a facade. If you really pulled
Yeah.
back the curtain and looked into their life, right? And so
Yeah,
then
that's
they're
probably
not a
true.
modeling. They're modeling their life off this other person, which is not good. you know?
Yeah, and that's probably true in more ways than people realize. So by the way, in the book, I talk about work addiction itself.
Mhm.
Some of my clients, their worst addiction is they will not accept failure or mediocrity.
Mm.
And I know that sounds really good, right? When you hear that, you're like, well, yeah, that's amazing. They don't accept failure.
Mhm.
But then the question is, what price do they pay for that? Right. So if it's an artist, do they not go to sleep for days?
Mm.
Do they eat either garbage or don't eat because they're stuck in creative mode and they cannot unlodge themselves? I mean, like, I never worked with her, but like, oh, why is she slipping my mind right now? Um, that soulful singer who British ended up killing
Oh,
herself,
yeah, Amy Winehouse.
Amy Winehouse, right? It's like everybody knew the problem, but there's like you
Mhm.
said, it's kind of like it's a little bit like watching a train wreck with some of
Yep.
the biggest geniuses and some of the biggest successes because we don't know sometimes how to find balance in the middle of the insanity.
Mhm.
Again, yeah, I've worked with athletes, but again, I've worked with musicians, athletes, CEOs. They get on a plane, they fly to Dubai or they fly to Australia. They got to land and go to meetings. They might take sleeping pills on the way because of all the differences in time zones.
Mhm.
That's okay once or twice a month,
Yeah.
2 to 3 times a month. You're doing it all the time, you lose the ability to go to sleep on your own. Now
Mhm.
you can't regulate. Now you're pushing yourself. So you may close an extra deal that month or an extra couple of deals, but what are you doing to your life long term? And so it's tough. We live, especially in America, especially in the US, we live in this place where success is measured by outside achievements.
Mhm.
But I've now worked with, I'll say at least dozens, but we're probably reaching 50 or above incredibly high performing individuals across all
Mm.
those athletics, performance,
Mhm.
executives, incredibly high achieving people who are objectively uber successful and miserable at the same
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And I don't know, it's tough, man, but I don't know that the trade is worth it. I don't
I
know that $50 billion in a bank account is worth waking up in the morning and popping pills and starting to drink because you can't deal with your day. I don't care who you're married to and how attractive the people you're dating are, how good the cars you have are, how
Yep.
big the private jet. It looks like misery when you're close to it.
Yep.
And so I think work addiction is one of the things people don't talk about, but you talked about this person who
Yeah,
buys
yeah.
stuff,
Mhm.
you know, it's
Yeah.
that's how they replace it.
Exactly. I was just before we started recording, I was telling, Adi that there's a gentleman that I just recently talked with. I connected with him years ago, because we were going through a program, together, and this gentleman was just super uberly, like you said, successful on the money side,
Yeah.
knew how to make money, amazing sales guy, just knew how to do it, you know, and, similar story, like, having to come out of prison recently because of some things that he did, because he knew how to make money, and he did it in an un and not in an illegal way, because he knew how to work the system.
Yeah.
And he realized, okay, he even knew what he was doing was wrong, and he knew kind of a way of, like, but he was like, he needed, like you said, he needed a timeout in his word. But here's
Yeah.
what it boils down to.
Totally.
What I think we're trying to get at here and helping people, he knew how to make money, but he wasn't living in his true purpose, in his true
He
calling
wasn't
and the things that.
authentic.
Yeah, right. And so people
Yeah,
are
and
put
then
upon.
you're living this made up life where you kinda
Yes.
have to constantly have to pretend to people about how things are going, and so you feel empty and you feel
Mhm.
by the way, you feel alone,
Yep.
surrounded by people because you're not
Mhm.
really you, so the people you're around don't really know what's going on with you, and you
Mhm.
feel some of the people I know, I might be the only person they can talk to.
Yeah.
It's literally me, and I'm a professional that they're paying money to,
Yep.
but even go beyond that, I'm not with them all the time. So
Right.
95% of their life, they're literally alone, and we kinda have to set these meetings so they can almost just emote and be their real selves and feel like they're not completely trapped in their heads. So, you talked, the way we got to this piece was about
Mhm.
accountability and ownership.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and I think there's just a point that I want to make because
Yes.
it can feel like a huge gap between where you are right now and where you need to go.
Mhm. Yep.
And now I'm giving you these examples of people who quote unquote made it, but had what I would consider wrong and terrible outcomes. Like
Yeah.
that is not how I want. But by the way, that's not to say that if you're wealthy and you made it, you have to be unhappy. There are also very happy rich people. It's just
Absolutely.
it's just that the money doesn't define the happiness, right? The money
Mhm.
can get you nicer cars and better planes while you're happy or unhappy. And if
Mhm.
you're unhappy, the better planes don't really work all that well. And so what I want to really impress upon people, this came front and center to me even more yesterday. I was talking to another friend of mine on a podcast, and just put one foot in front of the other.
Mhm.
Just it's gonna take a lot of reps, just
Mhm.
like working out at the gym, you
Yep.
know? There's no workout you can do today. It does not exist on the face of the planet, and if somebody tells you that it does, they are lying to you and they're trying to get your money. Stop. There's no workout today that will make you healthy.
Mhm.
Doesn't exist. There
Mhm.
are 5,000 workouts that if you do them every day or a variant of them every day for the next 3 years will make you healthy. So
Mhm.
remember that for your own life, right? There's no single path that you will choose today that will fix all your problems. Will not happen. But if you pick one positive habit that you are not engaged in today, one of my favorite, really, really simple one is start expressing gratitude in your
Mhm.
life every day for
Mhm.
what you have. A lot
Yes.
of people like me, I don't know if you're the same, but a lot of these high
Mhm.
achieving people, um, unfortunately, I get to put myself in that category, although nowhere near where some of my clients have been. Um, a lot of us were much better at looking at what's broken and not working than looking at what's already successful. And that
Mhm.
creates a really terrible lens to look at the world through because you can fly in your G5, but wonder why that seat isn't clean.
Mhm.
Right? Or you can have an amazing vacation to Fiji and be on your yacht and be really, really upset that it rained today. Like,
Mhm.
you can just throw things off so badly. The example I use, I think I use this in the book, but it's like you can walk in after a good day of work, you accomplish life, your family's all waiting at the table, they're all ready for dinner, and everybody's really, really happy. And there's a towel in the corner of the room that just somebody left on the floor. And you look at the towel, you're like, what the hell? And you just start screaming at why that towel is there. You just
Mhm.
missed 99% perfection for the
Mhm.
1% working. So that's just why I like the gratitude habit, and there are a lot of
Yes.
actionable tips like this in my book. Um, but start with one. Start with one
Mhm.
habit and commit to not finishing a day without it. Do it in the morning, but then if you forgot in the morning, do it in the afternoon. If you remember, do it in the evening. Just do not pass a day without that habit. And when that habit becomes so well ingrained, you can't live a day without it,
Mm.
add another habit and another habit. It's called habit stacking. I did not invent it. But next thing you know, 2 years from now, you've got 4 or 5 things, 7 things, 10 things that help you live a better life, and you will be happier for it.
Mhm. Oh, man. You're dropping gold here. I hope everybody's catching this. We're getting close to the end of our episode here. Um, encourage folks to follow up, get your book. How do they connect with you? Abby?
Yeah, so, the book is on Amazon, everywhere else. It's also I have a website called Read Unhooked, READ Unhooked, .com if you wanna just check out more things about the book. Um, djaffe.com is my website. And I'm on all social media, so from LinkedIn to Instagram as Dr. Adi Jaffe, and that's Dr. Adi Jaffe. If you want to check me out there, would love to connect. And yeah, and just as you read my stuff, as you pay attention, right, I have my own podcast and
Mhm.
Psychology Today blogs that I've been writing for years, and TEDx talks, and a lot of free things that are out there as well. Um, you know, part of the reason I share my story, and this is that last piece I'll say that I was going to talk
Yes.
about before about shame. I had many people in the beginning of my journey tell me to not tell my story. They
Yeah.
told me specifically that if I tell my story, it'll block my ability to be successful because people will doubt my genuineness or my objectivity. What I found is exactly the opposite. The more authentic and transparent you are, the better and bigger life gets, because people learn to trust you because you don't mind airing out your dirty laundry.
Mm,
Now, again, that doesn't I still have to do the work to keep becoming a better person, right? It's not, you don't do one instead of the other. You do, it's a
yep.
yes and sort of theory. And so I urge everybody listening right now, just pick. It doesn't matter what it is. Just pick one thing you've learned that will make your life better. Commit 100% to doing it, and over time, it'll work.
Man, we're so grateful to have you here. There's so much more we unpack, but we wanted to give you, some takeaways, and I really like the habit stacking that you shared. I mean, that and the gratitude, super, super powerful, something you can do right away today.
Heck
Go,
yeah.
you find somebody you can appreciate and thank them and acknowledge them in your life. I'm thankful for you to be on here on the podcast, and for all of you that have enjoyed this podcast, like I said, go find Dr. Jaffe. He's got some great resources. We'll be posting all the show notes and all that. Like, subscribe, share the podcast with others that you are
Yeah,
listening that
absolutely.
may benefit from this, right? They're facing
Absolutely. Absolutely.
burnout stress, right? So they're not alone, right? Hey, there's somebody else that's dealing with this. Um, you
100%.
know,
Absolutely.
um, so grateful to have you here. Thanks so much for being on the Business Roundtable podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, David.
My
Been a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Thanks everybody for listening.